Okay, so now we're on our final part of this recording, assign cost resources to tasks. Okay, so you want to enter planned travel costs for a new book, and the task requires air travel by the author Tony Poe, and you allocated $800 in anticipation of this expense. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up our 8C file this time. So this is my 8C, which is a continuation of the last one. And we are going to perform the following task. So now we're going to go into assign resources, and we are going to find the name of travel, and we're going to add that into the value field. Okay, so I'm going to go into assign resources. I'm going to go to the resource name travel, and I'm going to specify a cost to that of €800. So I'm going to go to task 17, which is down here, assign reading and signing at book fair. Okay, I'm going to go up to resources. I'm going to go to assign resources, and I'm going to select the resource of travel, and I'm going to enter in, because already in the sheet, €800 in there, and I am going to click assign. So that is going to assign a travel cost of €800 to your project. Now, if I go back over here and I go to my resources, you will see that the travel is down as T, and it's down as a type of cost, which means you're able to put the cost value in. It's pro rata, so you're able to put the cost value into your spreadsheet. So if I go in here now again, travel and assign resources, travel cost, so I'll go back here into my resources, and I'm going to, again, task 17, and you can put whatever value you want in here. So here I have 800, but you could change that to 700 or whatever the case is. Now maybe I have it already put in for you, but there you put in you type your value in there, you click on assign, and that will assign, sorry, I didn't want the copy editors, that will assign that particular cost to that particular resource. So you can assign a cost at this point in time doing it that way. So select travel and time into the value of €800 into the cost field, because you could take a note there actually that in the resource sheet how that is pro rata, which means that the cost can vary from time to time. So by having it and the travel cost in as prorated, it means that when you are assigning that against a person, it's not a resource per se, but it's not a person resource, but it's a cost resource against a person. When you assign it, you have the option of putting in the value in there. Okay, whereas these options here are specifically to do with people in your project. Okay, so enter 800 into the cost field, and there you go, and there you have your tick in your box, and you have your 800 null resay. So as you will see in the Gantt chart and the task form, assigning resource has no effect on the scheduling of a task. Note the task has the same duration of 1 day, and Tony Poe has the same units of work. So assigning a cost resource affected only the cost incurred by the task. The cost resource has no impact on the scheduling of a task. Okay, so that's fine, because like when you're adding a cost resource, it's not a person, so it's not going to make something go faster or slower. It's just going to actually add to the cost of the project. So you won't have any action button, because you're not going to be reducing the time, because it's not going to give you the option to reduce the time. Because it is a cost resource, so it's just simply increasing the cost. Okay, so close the assignment box. Okay, so now we're going to look at what happens after we've all of this done. So it's time to explore the results of it after you have your work done. So you're into your 8C, and you are going to go in and now look at your options. So if I'm now in 8C and I go to my summary tab, and I go over here to there's my resource usage, so my task usage view. And if I go up here to view and I go down to my table and I select my summary table, you will now see the value of the project because now it is obviously, because we put in all our resources, etc., it has now got a cost, the number of hours, and it has the number of days, etc. So you will see that is after being updated, and that's now because obviously you've assigned the resources against your particular task. Okay, so note the duration is 41 days. At the start of the project, the duration was 41 days. The shorter duration you see is the result of the changes that you made. The project summary task is 19,740. It's the cost of the resources, etc., that you put into the project. Okay, so you see that by going up to view, into tables and selecting summary. So you can also go into resource usage as well. So there's all these different views. So you'll be cracking up with all the different views. But there's a resource usage view, and you can have a look at all those different options there. But the task usage is pretty much giving you an awful lot of this stuff anyway. And you'll be able to see all of that information. So in your exam, we can ask you at the end of the project, you know, what view or what is the value for the total cost of the project or whatever. Okay, so it's handy to switch between task usage and resource usage. Both views show your details, but they're grouped in different ways. And I suppose the big thing is the summary table is handy because it gives you options around the various summaries on your task. Okay, so the last thing here is just a kind of few small little bits, is setting the baseline of your project. Okay, so if you remember from our lectures, we talked about a baseline, and we said when you have any project, you have to call a day and say, okay, we now need to set a baseline, and it is from the baseline that you are going to be judged as to whether the project is within, you know, on track or not on track. So setting it, and if you remember, I played you a video called Setting a Baseline. If you look at the videos, and there's a lady there talking about why you set a baseline and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so setting a baseline in a project is very, very easy. So I'm just going to show you how you do that. So for this, we're going to open Simple Task Baseline 9A. Okay, so I've opened up 9A here, and here is I'm in my Gantt chart view. I have this moved over slightly that I can see what I'm doing. All my resources are over here like they always were, etc., etc. So all that is done. We have no over allocations. Everything looks fine. And we have our predecessors and all that jazz, and we have a lovely Gantt chart over here at the side. So we're pretty much ready to go, and we want to set a baseline. We're saying we're going to be measured on this. Okay, so open Simple Tracks Baseline. So what we're doing is the new book launch is now fully developed. So you don't set a baseline until you're kind of near the end of your planning phase. Actual work on the project will begin soon. To allow for later comparison of actual and the current schedule with the plan, you must first save a baseline. Okay, so basically what you're doing is when you have a baseline, you're able to compare what happened versus what should have happened. Okay, so a lot of the time when you're using baselines, you're going to be working in task sheet view. So to save the baseline, use the default baseline settings, switch to task sheet view, display the variance table to display the usage and the baseline figures. Okay, so if I go back into Microsoft Project, so here we have our Gantt chart view, here we have our task usage view, your team viewer view, etc. So if I go into task usage, and if I go into my tables here, one of the tables you can select is variance. So what variance gives you? It gives you a date by which what you said was going to happen. So when did you start? What was your baseline? And what actually happened. So at the moment we've set it for start and finish. We have no baseline set, and therefore we have no deviation between what actually happened and what we said was going to happen. Okay, but so the whole idea of this is that you're using this as a guideline to say difference between what did happen and what didn't happen, and are we out on our baseline. Okay, so how do you set a baseline full stop? Okay, so how you set a baseline, it's so simple. Okay, you go up to project, and up here you will see the option to set a baseline. We have our project, and you are hitting, and there under the schedule tab, set baseline. Now when you click on that, you take the option set baseline and you give your baseline a name. So normally we call them baseline 1, 2, 3. You can set multiple baselines. So for the moment, I'm going to say set baseline 1 on the entire project and choose OK. Now nothing appears to happen in that there's no red buttons going off or anything like that. But what you have done now is you have set a baseline for your project. So how I can see it set is that if I go into set baseline, I can see that it'll tell you automatically if a baseline has been set. Okay, so I'm not sure if I cancelled recording it, I'm not sure, so I'm just going back in again. So how I'll see if there's a baseline set, if I click on set baseline, you will see last baseline saved on Sunday, the 12th of the 11th, 23, so that's today. So I've set a baseline, that's how I can see that a baseline has been set. So all you're really doing is you're just going in, you're selecting the option set baseline, and that is setting a baseline for your project. So it says you already set it on this day. Do you want to override it? I'm going to say no, because I'm happy with the one that I have set today. So that's how you see whether you've set a baseline or not on a project. Okay, so on the project tab, you can see in the note set baseline, and to save it, you set, and then you select it from the list. Now, if you wanted to set a subsequent one, you'd go through the same thing again on a different date, and you would then be able to see which baseline, the second one would be baseline 2, and on we go baseline 3, 4, and 5 or whatever. But normally you'd only have one baseline set for our notes anyway. Okay, and the idea is then that you could see the difference between what you said and what was going to happen by looking at the variance. So if you went into your project and you went into your task usage, and here you can see your baseline, you have your finish date, you have your baseline set based on the dates in question, and you can see is there a variance between what you said you'd do and actually what happened. Okay, so that's why this is after being populated now, because we've got a baseline set. Now we're not going to be completing a project and saying what we did, but this is how you measure the project against what you said you were going to do. And in your Gantt chart, you can actually set it up to show the Gantt chart against the baseline of whichever baseline it is you want to do. So you can go into your Gantt chart view, and in the bar styles you select which baseline it is you want to compare your chart against. Okay, so my usage table that I just showed you there, I can see the difference between what was going to happen and what did happen. If I go back into my Gantt chart here, if you go to the Gantt chart view, you can go to under the format menu, you have baseline, and you can compare it against the baseline. So we've only one baseline, so I'm going to click on that, and now what you'll see the two different bars. So one is depicting the baseline and the other is depicting what is the actual path. So if you find that they're wrong, that they're going out, something has missed the baseline or not, that is where you're going to see that showing up there. So that's how you can track the baseline. And if you had a number of different baselines, we only had one because we've only one set, that's how you mark your baseline. And at the moment, the baseline, if I untick it, it's showing in a grey box, and people get very fancy and they pick all these different colours. Like you could go for a green or a blue colour. So then when I put my baseline, it's going to be slightly different depending on what it is you're going to do. And you can even format the baseline to be a different colour if you want to get very mad about it, putting different colours on your baseline, etc. So this is a measure of what happened versus the reality of whether you wanted it to happen or not. So I'm just going to turn off that option for the moment. So for the exam, all you really need to know is how do I set a baseline. So that's the format menu, which we're not really interested in. So to set a baseline, you went up into your task, and you selected the option to set a baseline from within your project. Okay, so set baseline is within your project. What I'm doing there in the Gantt chart is I'm showing you the baseline, but it's the project set baseline. And how I know you've it done or not is when I do it, I will see the date here, which will be the date you'll say of your exam, whatever, and that will tell me whether or not you have set a baseline. We're not going to get too interested in variances and stuff like that. Okay, two last things. So the next thing is adjusting task relationships. So here we talked about the fact that, you know, we have our relationships set up, and in a lot of cases they're finish to start relationships. We can also have start to start relationships, but sometimes they can be changes made. You know, you have a small bit of flexibility with tasks. So if you remember in our lecture we talked about float and slack. Okay, so that's this option here. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to open up a different workbook, which is 9B, to talk about that particular topic. So this is going to be our last one we're going to open up. Okay, so when you open this up, you might end up having to jump it around a bit to see what you're doing, but you see all the various tasks and stuff shopping up there, and it's the same as before. Obviously you have your task usage, you have your costs, you have all this stuff. So it's the same workbook, obviously, we've been working on from the start. Okay, so this is a slightly different plan this time, and we're just going to talk to you about how we are going to change the difference between each of those. So editorial and print design on the new book's launch is about to begin. At this stage, your initial plan with task name, durations and relationships and resources. So that should make sense now. You have your tasks put in, you put in how long they're going to be, you put in whether they're start to finish, etc., and you've put in who's going to do them. You now want to fine-tune this to perform the following task. So add a lag between task 31 print and ship and its predecessor task 30, so that the task starts 3 days after task 30. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to introduce the concept of a lag. So this time we're going to select task 31. So you, as you know, when you start working with tasks, you always go to the one below. So we have task 31, print and ship. And at the moment, it's a start to finish relationship, 29 and 30. And if I go over here to my Gantt chart, you will see there is 29 and there is 30. Just move this back a bit. And there is a start to finish relationship between those. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to double click on this task, or else I can right click and go into information. And you go here to your resources, and here you have your resources, advanced, notes, etc. And here you have your predecessor tab, which is the one that we're looking at under your predecessors, and we have start to finish 0 days. And here is where you can put in lag. So if I put in 3 for 3 days, it's going to add a lag of 3 days. So now what's happening? This is what's happening now. That's what a lag looks like. So you have your task, and then you have a lag of 3 days, and before the other task can begin. Okay, so add a lag, task 31, to its predecessor, so that it starts 3 working days after task 30. So you select 31, select the predecessor tab, enter 3 in the lag phase. Note that 30fs plus 3 is now in the predecessor column. So what you will see 30fs plus 3. So that's telling you that this is a finish to start relationship, and there's a lag of 3 days. So we can be asked that in the exam. What does 30fs plus 3 mean? So it means that there is a finish to start relationship with a lag of 3 days. You can also be asked this: what does this symbolize in Microsoft Project? So it symbolizes that the color printing activity, that there is a lag between it and the next activity, whatever that activity is. Now it's printing services, and you won't be able to see it there, but basically you don't need to know that basically it's this option, that there is a lag between activities. Okay, so note the value 3fs is now in the predecessor column. Note the changes in the Gantt chart. So it might be, if I had you in class now, I'd ask you to draw that box in. So draw that box into your notes, so you'll see what a lag represents, because you can be asked that in the exam. Now the opposite of an exam is an overlap. So overlap task 10, copy editor, with its predecessor task 9, so that there is a 25% remaining point of duration. So when there's an overlap, it's always a negative value. That's really important. So I want you to underline that in the notes. It's a negative lead time. So overlaps are always negative. So this time we're going to go to author review of copy editor. So I'm going to go up here to task number 9. And if we look up here and if we go back into the Gantt chart again, just to find that in your Gantt chart, we have author number 9. Yeah, we have author revenue. So we have author revenue. Copy editor is here. Sorry, I'm the wrong one. Here we are. So we have copy editor and we have our various options here. So what we need to do this time is we need to go to the Copy Edge Incorporated tab, and we're going to double click on that. We have a finish to start relationship, which is fine, and we're going to put in minus 25%. Okay, and that's how you enter a negative value into your Gantt chart. So minus 25%. So when you do that, you'll get minus 25 showing up here, and the Gantt chart can change depending on the duration. So because this was actually, I'm going to actually change this to be longer, that you'll see this more aggressively. So going away from the notes. So I'm going to put minus, just to give you a bigger value. I'll just change that. I should type it in, but anyway, I'll put in minus 50%. Minus 50, okay, just to show you a bit better. And then I choose OK. So that is giving you a bigger overlap, and it's a finish to start relationship. So what you have here, okay, you have a minus. So you always put in a minus value in there. So double click on task 9, select the predecessor tab, in the negative value into the column. Okay, so change the relationships. Okay, so that's fine. So that's entering a lag, and it is entering a lag and entering a negative value. So that doesn't change your graph. It just gives you options around it. So minus. So if I'm asking you what does this stand for in a workbook, you'd say this stands for it's a finish to start relationship, and there is an overlap of 50%. So that's an overlap, whereas the one below is there isn't an overlap. You have 3 days of a lag. So plus 3 is a lag, minus 50 is an overlap. Okay, so you need to know both of those. So make sure that you're clear on both of those. Okay, now, okay, so this is another one. So this is a different type of relationship again. Change relationship between task 14, designer illustrator, and its predecessor task 13, that you're going to change it to a start to start relationship. Okay, so what we're actually, and on that one actually, this is an example of your overlap there. So look, that's an overlap. So you have this popping down and you have this popping up underneath that there. So copy editor and author review. Actually, I'm just looking there. I think I've a mistake in my notes in regards to the file and the instructions. So I suppose just to go over this again. So if you have 2 tasks, I'll just use this as an example. So I have 2 tasks here, content editor and author review of content. And you can see here, this is happening here. There's a finish to start relationship. There's nothing happening on the Saturday and Sunday because of the fact that they're non-working days, so that's fine, and we're popping away down here. So if I come down to this task and I say, actually, I can overlap that task, so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to put minus, I don't know, 30%, just to put in something, and allow it to overlap. You will now see that symbol. Okay, so see, it's overlapping. So that's the symbol for overlapping. So I have that on the notes there, but I don't think it worked on the exercise I've done. So that's your overlap symbol. So you need to know what does that symbol mean, and also be aware it's minus 30% or minus. It's always a percentage based on what you are doing. Okay, so this one, I'm just looking at the start to start relationships. Sorry, no, so we've done all this. Sorry, I'm jumping around between all these screens. So change the relationship between interior and set pages. So we go to the lower ones, we go to set pages. So I'm going to go down here, and at the moment I can see there is my relationship set up and our interior design is set up. So I'm going to go to this one and I'm going to set pages, and I'm going to change it to a start to start, and that makes it a start to start relationship. So we've covered that already anyway, but that's your S to S. So when you see SS, it means start to start, and that's the symbol of a start to start relationship. So when you're working at all of this, just beware, you have the different types. The only type we normally use, that I always use, is these two, but you have these ones as well, but you need to know those for the exam: start to start and start to finish. You have the lags, +2, +3 days, or you have an overlap, which is minus, and it is set at a percentage. Okay, so that's changing it to a start to start, etc. And then this is talking about the SS for start to start. So again, you can be asked, what does that mean in the exam? So it's a start to start. Okay, two more things. How do you set a constraint on a task? Okay, so rather than opening up another workbook, I'm going to continue on with this one. So sometimes in a project, you will find that you have to set a constraint. Maybe there's things have to happen at a certain time. So you set a constraint on your project. Okay, so what we will do there is we will go to the task that you are setting the constraint on, and we will just click the option to set constraint. So it said apply a start no later than on the constraint of the 20/7/21 to task 16, proofread and index. So what you're doing there is you're going down to your task, proofread and index, you're double clicking on it, and here are your various options. So we have our general option, we have our predecessors, which we've talked about already, we have our resources, we have our advanced, notes, which you add a note. But if you go to advanced, here is your constraints, and there's lots of different types of constraints. So finish no later than, finish no earlier than, must finish on, must start on, start no later than, start no earlier than, and you've all these different types of constraints. So it said we must set a constraint start no earlier than the 20th of the 7th 21. So we go to our constraints, we say start no earlier than, and we put in our constraint date, so whatever that is, so the whatever date, so the 20th of the 7th 21 according to this. And this obviously would make sense if if you were, especially if you're working in a college environment, when you need to have things done by a certain date or whatever. So you're setting a constraint on your project. So I'm setting that, and I'm choosing OK. So when you set that, when you set a constraint in Microsoft Project on a project, that is the symbol that you get. This symbol at the left, it's in that bar at the left, and it's task can finish no later than constraint. So that's the symbol of a constraint. So you can go into any task that you want, go over to the predecessor tab, pick the type of constraint that it is, and pick the date. So you have to put the date in, because all constraints are based on dates. Okay, so point to the indicator to set the constraint type. So there you can see, look, that is the constraint once it is in. So you can write a circle or take a note on that, that's how you set your, that's what a constraint looks like. And how you set your constraint is go into the advanced tab, and you pick what type of constraint it is, and you pick your indicator. So you can pause this video and take that down. And what you can also do, if you don't know where it is, you can click on it, come up here and hit constraint, or type in the word constraint, and it will bring up task information, and it'll get you in here where you need to go to advanced, and you pick your constraint. So you have all of that options in there. It's reasonably straightforward. And then you'll see the indicator, which is that box on the left hand panel indicating that you have a constraint in. Okay, now the last thing is putting in a reoccurring task. So that is something that is happening every single day. Maybe you have a meeting every week or whatever, and you want to set it as a reoccurring task in your project. So what we're going to do to set a reoccurring task, you can open up that file if you want to, but normally a reoccurring task, this is the symbol it's going to have. It's going to have a symbol of a kind of an arrow, a circle with an arrow pointing, and basically you pick when you set a reoccurring task, it's like a calendar outfit. You pick a duration and you pick when it's going to happen, etc. So it says insert a new occurring task, editor staff meeting, so it appears above task 1 acquisition. So normally you put it at the start. This task has a 1 hour duration every Monday, starting on this day and ending on this day. So you're setting this up as a task for yourself. Okay, so we're going to just do that. So set a reoccurring task. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go back up to the top here and we're going to put in a reoccurring task in here. So if you go to your task menu, you will see here are your task names. And in here, look, there is reoccurring. So normally, like you just type in the task, but to put in a reoccurring task, you have to click on where you want to put it, which is over here. Click on task and you put reoccurring. You put in here what it is. So I'm going to say editorial meeting. Okay, it's occurring every week. It's reoccurring. It recurs every week on a Monday. We're going to say it's on a Monday. And the duration, now this is important, the duration is normally an hour. So you have to change that to an hour up there because it's not a full day. So every Monday for a week, starting on whatever date, so it's normally starting on today and ending on, so whatever day the thing tells you. So we're going to start on the 9th to the 4th and we're going to end on, I'm going to just bring this back a bit because it's kind of a different workbook to the one we're using. So it's starting on, that's 2018, so it's in, so I'm going to start on the 30th, start on the November 18. Okay, so just to give me, that's 34 different meetings. So the most important thing up here, guys, is the 1H for the hour. You choose OK, and there it puts in those as reoccurring meetings. Now you can normally, what we do with that is we hide that, so we don't need to see all that, that you don't need to be looking at all those details popping up there. So you can get rid of the, you can collapse that you're not looking at it, but that is the symbol for a reoccurring meeting. So normally when we get you to do that in the exam, we normally get you maybe to put 2 or 3 meetings. You're not going to have that big long list of meetings going on like that. And they're normally set at manually selected. So we're not really overly interested in that for the moment. But just note that that is where you have a reoccurring task. So you can just expand that, you see, to get rid of that option at the side there. Okay, so reoccurring task. So select reoccurring task, enter 1 hour in the duration box, select weekly into the appropriate end time. So again, you need to just highlight that and take note that it's 1 hour in duration, and again, maybe pause the video, weekly, and that's how you set a weekly task. Now, another thing you need to take note is exam. That does come up in the exam. Normally we tell you that there's a meeting on from a certain date to a certain date, and you will, an hour meeting or whatever. The big thing is to remember to change that, so make a special note of that, the 1 hour duration, because they're not full days that you're putting in your meetings. Okay, very last thing is setting the critical path. Now, rather than going through all this jazz here, we talked about the critical path, and that you can see the critical path to your project. And the critical path is identifying the tasks that if you change them, you will be able to identify them or not. So what I'll do, just because it's a kind of a different workbook, this is definitely the last one, we're going to go to 9C. So just open up that for a minute. Okay, so if I've opened up 9C here, I'm inside in my Gantt chart and I can see all my tasks, and here is my Gantt chart over here at the side, my calendar, and I can see all the tasks. So the best thing to do to show you this is maybe move down to the bottom, that you can see the tasks here, from maybe this part down. Now, what we're talking about here is you can turn on this critical task checkbox. So what that does is it shows you the tasks on the critical path. So if I go back in here and if I go into my Gantt chart, you can tick this box. So critical path. So what that does, it shows you all tasks in the critical path in a certain color, and then the tasks that are not in this, like create mockup and review author, is not on the critical path, where these ones are according to this. Now, if you want to get very finicky, you can go into format and bar styles, and you can come down here and you can find critical path, and you can decide, I'm going to change the colour of that, and I normally used to do this, to a bright red colour. So now the critical path is showing very obviously on my Gantt chart, so I can see what paths I can or cannot change, or what tasks I can change. So if you change something on the critical path, it's going to have an effect on the end of your project, whereas I can move these around and they're not necessarily going to have an effect on the duration of my project. But what I find much easier, rather than doing it that way, is to add a new column which is called critical, and pick whether it addresses whether it's yes or no. So you can see this is yes and this is no, and that will tell you whether something is on the critical path or not. I feel that's probably better than going in here and having to turn on critical paths and changing the colours and all that stuff. But on your notes, I've covered off both of them. So it talks about, on the format menu, select the critical tasks checkbox. Project applies to critical paths bar. Now, I didn't talk to you about changing the colours because that's not really overly important, but you know, you would normally change the colours. But for yourself, I'd write down a big circle. Easier. It's easier to add the critical path where it is depicted to show a Y or an N. So basically, the easiest thing is add a column and it will show the Y or the N. Okay, so that's the easiest way for you to answer that question in the exam, asking you, is something on the critical path or not? Okay, I'm not going to do the last one, examining the costs of the project. So basically that's just talking about after you've done all your work, you can go back into your project and you can turn on task view and go into your cost sheet, and you can see all the various costs and all that stuff. But that's not really important for us now. So we'll just leave it that we've finished there on the piece on the critical path. Okay, so this is the end of this recording. Thank you.